Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. I know yesterday I was not around and I apologize. Désolé, please forgive the gal. Yeah, the day just got away from me and I ended up not recording. And it was like 7 and I was like, do I have time to record and edit anything that's actually going to be valuable to anybody who watches it? And the answer was no. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna do it tomorrow. So we're back for Vlogmas Day 4. Yeah, with just a little bit of a ramble. We're going to be asking and speaking about inherited aspirations, wants, and needs, where they come from, and we're also going to speak about how we can, just take them, bundle them up, and give them back. To take these aspirations that never belonged to us in the first place, these ideas, these notions of how we're supposed to be and what we're supposed to achieve, and bundle them up and figuratively give them back to whoever the heck gave them to us, and start to create our own system, our own value system of what we actually want in our lives, to be able to regain our imagination of what's possible and what our lives can look like, basically. So okay, so the reason that I wanted to speak about this is because I'd say that this is a bit of a theme in my life, or like something important that I am just mindful of, probably since I was like 18, because I grew up in a very conservative family in a very conservative country. And once I was an adult, it was finally like I was free to be like, oh, actually, what do I want personally that's not dictated by being in somebody's house or attending this type of organization that tells me that they have these types of values. I would say it's been since then, but more intentionally in the past 5 years, I have been basically acting like a child who asks, why? Like anything that has been imposed upon me, or even things that I feel like are coming from me, like I'll start feeling this intense need for something, and then I have to ask myself, okay, why do you want that? Why do you need that thing? Why do you want to do that thing? Why? Is there a level to which you want to be perceived in a certain way? Like, why? Basically, there's just that unpeeling of the desire onion, where you just keep going, why, till you get to the crux of it. And so much of this goes to the crux of conditioning and all of these things that have been given to you that you never asked for. And like, we can't blame ourselves for basically having these things. Sorry, I need to check that. Yes, we're recording. Okay. You can't blame yourself for having some of these wants and needs and aspirations. It's very, very, very normal. We are impressionable beings. We are both nature and nurture. So we are susceptible to all of this information that we get from around us. But I just want to encourage people that it is possible to get to the bottom of your wants and desires and interrogate whether they're actually yours. And once you have realized that they aren't actually yours, you are very much able to get rid of them and decide on a new value system that belongs to you. So I guess I'll present the very stereotypical example, which is probably like more of like a boomer example, where you have this person who's done everything right. They got the job, maybe they went to university, got their little degrees, they got the well-paying job, they got the corner office, they have their family with the white picket fence and the 2.5 kids and the, golden retriever. And yet there is still this like sinking feeling of dissatisfaction. And this is one of the things that kind of pushes midlife crises, where people start seemingly acting out when they're in, their 40s, 50s, 60s, and you're like, what is happening? And the truth is, this is just a person who is trying to express, trying to find some level of agency and expressing certain desires, because for their whole life, they actually haven't been leading their life according to themselves. It's been, I just got reminded of this meme, which is maybe tangentially related, but not exactly related, but it was funny to me, where basically people are like, oh, tradition and culture and stuff like that are peer pressure from ancestors. So this is not technically it, but yes, sometimes our values and our aspirations come from our culture, and they are not actually things that we ever cared about. But we continue to perpetuate these same things over and over again because we are so convinced that they are our desires Sorry, I keep hitting my mic. We are so convinced that they are our desires. And I think that it leads a lot of people into crisis where they feel like, yes, I've done everything that I was supposed to do. Why do I feel this emptiness? And sometimes they feel like it's a them thing, or they feel as if society failed them and was like, there's like a conspiracy against them or a conspiracy against young people, which is not young people, but people in general, that, you know, forces them into these ways of life and this and that and that, which to an extent is true. There are a lot of agents of socialization, which I'll get into just now, that really prime us and condition us to be cogs in the machine that is modern society, from the education system, from, you know, church to television to whatever else. We are, you know, we're being funneled into being productive members of society to keep the status quo running and operational. So yes, to a degree, that is true. But we also have, I believe, so much more agency than we think that we do. We really think that we have to have these lives that look a certain type of way, or do things in a certain type of way, when you really don't. You can actually like blow up everything and do whatever the heck you want, as long as it's not affecting somebody else in a negative way. Which that can kind of also have some gray area. But generally, if you're doing something, you're making your own decisions, you're not putting anybody in harm's way, and it looks different than what society expects, that's absolutely okay. But people are, yeah, our imaginations have been hijacked by culture. Our imaginations have been hijacked by our conditioning to a point where we feel like we have so few paths. And now that we live in the age of the internet and everything, like there's an illusion of there being more paths, but even so, people are still going down certain routes. So for example, maybe years ago, there was no way that somebody could make money from posting pictures online because the internet didn't exist and influencer culture didn't exist. And now that option is there. So people feel like, oh, well, I can do all these extra things and I can do that and I can do this and I can do that and I can do this. But it's still a very curated, we still live in this space of so many curated possibilities, if that makes any sense. You're still being shown an option for what you can do, and then after you've been shown the option for what you can do, that's what you decide to do, rather than us being imaginative people and creating a life that looks however we want it to look. That might involve experimentation, that might involve all sorts of different things where we're trying things out, seeing how they work, and then creatively combining a lot of different things into a way that works for us. Basically, I feel like we should aspire towards what we actually want. So, I'm going to give some examples of certain things that are aspirational, that we all really, really believe that we need, but we may not necessarily, right? So this is a bit of an outdated one, but there's still people in certain societies that truly believe that this is a thing. And this is formal employment, right? And by this, I mean formal employment as opposed to, say, being a freelancer or an independent contractor or even a creative gig worker. For example, someone can decide that they want to be a dancer and they don't want to be formally employed by anybody, and they just make money from gig to gig, working with different people at their own pace and on their own time. Obviously, if you have dependents, you have people who you're responsible for, and if you have no other options, like no one is saying that it's a negative thing to go get a 9-to-5, but these things should never necessarily be the standard. Formal employment is a great thing to have, but it's not a wrong thing to say, I don't want to sell my time to somebody and have to, answer to them when I want to take a day off, or answer to them when I'm sick. I have to go as a grown adult and ask another grown adult if I can spend my sick day nursing myself. Like, these are things that I find to be extremely odd. And they are fueled by these aspirations that we were given. This is not a novel take. I'm sure that many of you, we're fortunately at a point in society where this is being questioned. But yeah, like when did we start aspiring to giving away our time towards the end of making some, millionaire or billionaire a lot of money just so that we can say, I'm gainfully employed, and so that we can be like proud of that. I don't know. When I was a child, that's not something I ever fully dreamed of. I just don't think that those are things that were really exciting to me, right? I'm now at the age where a lot of people are having children as well, and this is not to dissuade anyone from having children. This is not to say that anybody who's had children is doing it because they've been told to do it. But I have had certain instances of people who I have spoken to who are now parents who are like, no one ever told me that it was going to be like this. No one ever told me it was going to be so stressful. No one ever told me, like, if I had known, I would not have gone down this route. Like, I am not maternal, all of these different types of things. And they're having to find this out after they've already made that decision. And they start feeling like very dissatisfied with it. And it's like, if you had just interrogated your aspirations before and not, parroted, oh, I want to have kids, just parroting it because that's what you've seen people say, that's what you've seen people do, then you would have avoided being in a situation that now you never dreamed of. So it makes it all the more difficult to work towards or to be productive in. What else? I live in Zim. So yeah, like I said, we're just a very like interesting culture. And so I see a lot of these aspirations every day. So there's this weird kind of like aspiration in Zim that may be dying out a little bit now, but was always like very pervasive when I was younger and even up till recently, where people aspire to leave our country and go to very like specific first world Western countries, typically. It's always like America or the UK. Because South Africa is our neighbor, people end up like going with that one as well. But there's almost even a hierarchy. Like if you manage to migrate to the States, the States is also like such a tricky example now because they're crazy. But like if you manage to migrate to the UK, that's like almost a step up from like migrating to say like Namibia or South Africa or something like that. And a lot of people really want this. Like a lot of people have this deep desire to get out. And people will be speaking to you. And like if you live here, for example, I live here, people will be like, okay, so you're there, so is there somewhere you want to go? Like this is such a normal conversation that I'm only now like, this is odd, bro. Like why is that always the assumption? And it's not even just from other people, also for me, that there's a level of like, my feet are kind of planted here, but it's like 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I'm like ready for the next thing. I know personally, because I'm just a little bit like content and I kind of try to live in the moment, that I'm not actively looking for anything, but there's always just been an openness and like something that you take for granted. You almost take for granted that like, I'm just here for the time being and then I'm going to leave. And that is so odd because it's like, who implanted that in your mind that is something that you should want? Genuinely, I can understand that if someone like is an economic migrant, they need to leave because they need better opportunities and all of these things. But if you're in a place where you're actually comfortable, like you want for nothing, then why do you have to still want to leave? Like, it's so odd. And it's not just a Zimbabwe thing. I used to live in Vietnam, and that was also a big thing there. A lot of developing nations, because of the PR of these more developed nations where it's like, we're them, we're the first world, we've got our shit together, blah, 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 blah. They project that through their media, through whatever else, by calling us third world nations, all of that people are like, I need to go. And it's like, but why? This is so strange to me. Does that even belong to you? And now you've put in so much work, you've put in all this effort, you've gotten your visa, and maybe your visa was rejected a couple times, so you lost money doing that, but you keep going back, and then you leave, and then you get to this place and you don't know anyone there, and you're lonely, and you're overworked and underpaid, and it's gloomy, because like the sun comes up at 8 a.m. and goes down at 4 p.m. and like people treat you like a second class citizen because you come from these third world countries and because you're an immigrant, or like all of these things, and you find yourself having achieved all of what you thought you were supposed to achieve, and you still feel empty. Or similar to the example that I gave before, you got your degrees, you got your car, you got your mortgage for your house, and you're paying it off, so you've got your house, you've got like all of these little things that you're supposed to have, yet when you sit down in the silence, you're still empty. So you decide, okay, I'm gonna drink it away, or I'm gonna party it away, or I'm gonna maybe look for a better job because maybe that will fill the hole, or maybe I'm gonna get a new car because maybe that will reward myself for working so hard, or all of these different things. But like, you're still not content, babe. And the truth is, if those were really your aspirations for real, if they weren't these inherited things that you never asked for, they were just given to you, and now you're doing them or working towards them like a robot, like a drone, not thinking about what they actually mean to you. Like, if they were actually yours, you would be content. You would want for nothing. You would be working maybe to maintain it, to maintain your aspirations, but you wouldn't constantly be striving for more and striving for more and striving for more, which a lot of us end up doing. And it's odd. Doesn't it say something that we're perpetually unsatisfied? Like, if our aspirations and the things we were working towards were things that we actually wanted, wouldn't we get to a point where all desires cease? Where you're actually content with where you live. You're actually content with, your appearance. You're actually content with all of these different things because they actually are what you wanted. Editing will share here to say, yes, that does say something, and it's something significant. But because this last example that I just used was one that I came up with at the end of recording, and I've had to move it to slot it into the examples section, what I say next doesn't really serve as a proper segue, so we're going to have to help the segue along ourselves. Right now, we are moving into the section that speaks about agents of socialization and explains why we have some of the aspirations that we have. The agents of socialization are basically these different institutions that mold us through messaging, through whatever else, through behavior, like reinforcing certain behaviors and dissuading people from other behaviors that basically condition us into what we believe is correct, what we believe is incorrect, how we feel is appropriate to engage in society, how we feel is appropriate to engage with other people, what we think is valuable work, what we think is menial work, what we think are lofty aspirations, what we think are vices. All of these things are informed by our agents of socialization. So we have things like the church or religion. I shouldn't say the church because different places have different things. So in the East, you might have religion such as Hinduism or Buddhism. In Africa, there's a lot of Christianity, that is one thing, Islam and those types of things. These are big institutions that from the time that you're a child, they teach you your morality, they teach you all of these things. And when you're in environments with people who believe in these things, you start sharing your beliefs. And that is a way that you can inherit certain aspirations that maybe never even reflected your tastes and what you're about. I have an example. I grew up in the church, very heavily. And when I was a child, I had very, very strong aspirations to be engaged in the church, to do all of these things that were churchy and stuff like that. And, now that I'm older and, I have the option to go or not go, I get into certain spaces that are very churchy or engage with people who are very vocally Christian. And I'm like, that's so odd because that just doesn't reflect anything about how I am, like whether it's beliefs about I'm gonna say, like, to me, bigoted beliefs, and maybe I'm a bigot for judging Christian beliefs, but like those types of things, very intolerant, very judgmental things, which are not exclusive to Christianity or religion at all. Like these things show up in other parts of society as well. But for me, I just find that, I would never choose as an adult to go to some of the spaces that I used to frequent when I was a child, and that I used to happily think that I was happily frequenting, because that was the only stuff I was actually allowed to do. Like socially, I wasn't allowed to do much by my parents. So it's like, okay, there's just so many things that I would do happily and think that they were my own ideas, that now that I am, not being coerced to do anything, it's just like, yeah, those aren't my values, babe. And that's completely okay. Another agent of socialization is school, the education system. I can't speak for education, at least primary and secondary education, anywhere else except for in Zimbabwe. In Zim, education is extremely, well, most school education is extremely conservative, extremely rigid, extremely punitive, and there are many environments. Some schools are better than others in this respect, but where you are not necessarily allowed to think for yourself, you might get punished if you think for yourself. You are told exactly how you're supposed to think. There are a lot of teachers who are extremely strict, and some of them even abusive in the way that they'll shout at you and say, like, this is what you should do, or this is what you shouldn't do. And like, there's things like manual labor, detention, corporal punishment that happen in some of these schools. I didn't fortunately experience corporal punishment, but yeah, manual detention, getting shouted at, getting humiliated in front of classes and stuff like that. These are some negative ways that you might be socialized in these environments. Or on the other hand, you might have an environment that is very open, very open-minded, that encourages critical thinking, that encourages play, that encourages curiosity, that doesn't punish people for making mistakes, and allows them to reflect on their mistakes and amend them. That's a form of socialization that is more positive, so that exists as well. We have the media, this is television, radio. Those are all traditional forms of media, but now we have new media, which is crazy. We all know what that is. And the other thing about some of these aspirations that we end up getting is it's like drive-by influence. Like you're not even looking for it, and it just passively comes at you, whether it's through movies, whether it's through advertisements, and especially in the influencer sphere with social media and stuff like that. A lot of this stuff is extremely passive, right? People end up wanting things because of what they see on these platforms, because of what they watch in movies, all of these different things. So the media is a very strong socializer as well. I've spoken about family, but yes, family is another agent of socialization, depending on the type of family you come from, and especially in collectivist societies, family is one of the biggest ways that we end up getting all of these aspirations that literally don't belong to us, because we spend so much time with these people, we value their opinions, and so sometimes we take these things on. When it comes to our parents, we take on their belief systems, we take on what they want, we take on all of these things, and we don't even realize it. We find ourselves way down the line, and it's like, well, I never wanted that. And yeah, sometimes it's hard to break away from that, because you don't want to disappoint them, because you love them. Sometimes you confuse your love for them and not wanting to disappoint them with your own aspirations. Like sometimes people break down when they have an amazing achievement, because they know, oh my God, my parent is going to be so proud of me, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, if you're doing that for them, then did you ever actually want that though? Like, I don't know. But yeah, that's another way. I've spoken about family, I've spoken about media, I've spoken about churches, I've spoken about schools. What else, brah? There are so many, and I don't, at this point, I don't I just don't remember. There's a fifth one that I wanted to speak about, but it's evading me right now. But basically, those are some of the ways that you can then be conditioned. So yeah, basically all of this rambling is because I want us to actually sit down and think about what aspirations are actually ours. What do we actually desire without the input of anybody else, without the judgment of anybody else? Oh my gosh, side note, sidebar. I just remembered one of the things that I was thinking about, even when I'm speaking about this, about like questioning the status quo and going ahead and doing your own thing. I've also found and noticed lately, especially with social media and stuff like that, that being called counterculture is also an aspiration that is being put on us. You know, there's a push for creativity and creatives, and the creativity is usually like people want things to be, you know, fresh, unique, like different, avant-garde and stuff like that, which is great. I love that. But, you know, not everyone is supposed to be that way. You know, some people do actually happen to like basic things or like normal things, and that's like the worst thing that you can be these days. So yeah, sometimes even check like, are your aspirations for certain things that are seen as counterculture and seen as cool, even down to fashion. Like the kids are going on Pinterest and looking for like the coolest and like craziest fits and stuff like that, and being like, oh my gosh, like this is what I want to look like, instead of like just liking what they like, you know what I'm saying? And doing things from like an organic place. That as well is a way of like having our aspirations shoved down our throats by the media. But anyway, that's a tangent. So these are some of the solutions that I think we have for actually figuring out what our own desires and our own aspirations are. So the first one is pretty simple and easy. You need to explore. So many people are kind of caught in their own bubbles. Even online, there are these echo chambers of thought where people believe one thing or another, and they all parrot the same opinions and all of that, and the algorithms make it that way that you continue to be funneled into like these echo chambers. And sometimes exploring is literally just being like, you know, this is how I've always done things, this is how I've always thought of things. What do other people think? It might be reading a book that you might have never thought to read before. And I'm not saying like you don't have to give the time of day to things that are like destructive, hateful, whatever. But just, yeah, stepping outside of your bubble. You know, if you're an atheist, maybe you could read a book on Buddhism or on Islam or on Christianity. If you are, you know, somebody who considers yourself like extremely manly or macho, you know, maybe you can watch RuPaul's Drag Race, or you can read Judith Butler, and like what she writes about gender and stuff like that. Yeah, I've also been out of uni for very long, so Judith Butler is like the only name that I recall about gender and stuff like that. Her stuff might be very outdated by now, but like insert whatever, you know, that speaks about machismo. You can read a book about like machismo and like, you know, how you present and all these types of things. Like just explore, be curious, be interested in expanding your mental horizons, so that once you see other things, once you feel other things, you know, it might even look like travel. If you have the means to travel, you could travel. But if you don't have the means to travel, it's as simple as hanging out in a different friend group than you usually would, going to a different part of town than you usually would, going to a different type of bar, attending an event that's completely novel and different to you. These are things that you can do to expose yourself to different things. And once your, you know, perception and your awareness expands, then there's more possibility, right? Because I'm speaking about your imagination being hijacked. We want to have greater and bigger imaginations, and our imaginations at this point right now are kind of as small as our conditioning. And that's really sad, because you end up leading a life that was chosen for you. And obviously, you know, a lot in life is determined by nature and nurture. You have your genetics, you have what you're nurtured by. So there's nothing wrong with, you know, following the path of least resistance. But just, I want you to know that you have the option not to. You can think about these things. You can, you know, go against what you're expected. You can go against what you once believed you wanted if you realize that it no longer aligns with who you are and what you truly believe. The other thing is you need to cultivate your desire for agency, right? You need, if there's any desire that I can give to you, that I can make you inherit, you can reject it if you don't want it, but I think it's a good one to have, is the desire for autonomy and the desire for agency. The desire to, like, in Shona people would say kusatongwa. Look at me dropping that. I hope that I'm not lying. But like, because I don't think that's a phrase, but like when someone says kutonga, it means like being ruled. So like where no one can rule you and no one can rule your emotions, no one can rule anything. I feel like the desire for that needs to be way bigger than, you know, any shame or any guilt or any fear. Like those emotions are real emotions and they're still going to come and they're still going to be present on your journey to being somebody who, you know, is more mindful and more intentional about cultivating what they actually want. Those emotions are never going to go away, but you can really cultivate that desire in you such that even if those emotions come, they are going to like be nothing compared to how much craving you have to be absolutely free and to be absolutely autonomous in the sense that you are able to set up your life in the way that you want to set up your life, right? The other thing is you really need to learn how to value your own opinions and how to value your own needs. A lot of times people end up going with what's expected of them and then they feel really resentful. Like, for example, what I was speaking about, people who've had kids and they didn't really want kids. And then there's some people who like maybe blame a partner or, you know, all of these different things and become resentful because they felt like they had to go along with things. But the truth is that just means that they didn't value their needs enough to disappoint somebody else by putting up a boundary or by, you know, just saying, yeah, I cannot fulfill your needs, so I'm gonna fulfill mine. So yeah, as people pleasers, that's a really, really big one. You need to work on loving yourself, bruh. Like, love yourself and value your opinions. Because like I said, that shame is gonna come knocking. You know, I am currently in my 30s and sometimes I still feel like, oh, you know, when somebody asks me what I'm doing, why I'm doing this or that, or like any of these things. And that young people pleaser part of me sometimes does want to cave or sometimes wants to appease and, you know, either make things appear a certain way so that that person is happy or whatever else. But I'm at the point where it's like, yeah, no, it's you or me, babe, and I have to choose me. Like I said, as long as I'm not putting anyone in harm's way, as long as you're not hurting anybody, being selfish in a way where somebody else is now at a detriment because of what you've done, like you have to dead that guilt and dead that people pleasing. You need to let go of that for real, because at the end of the day, you're going to be on your deathbed speaking to who? Speaking to those people who you appeased years ago? No, speaking to yourself and saying, why did my life end up looking like this? Because I was too afraid to ruffle a few feathers, or I was too afraid to be judged. Like, guys, no. Yeah, no. And I'm genuinely like speaking to myself. These are things I have to remind myself all the time. I don't get those pangs of shame and stuff like that as much anymore, or like those pangs of guilt. I still get them, but they're not as frequent. But then sometimes when they come and I find myself like wallowing and like, oh, bending. And then I'm like, sis, wait, what? What's happening? Wait, like, not after all the work that we've done for all these years are we falling back into these things. Like, no. So yeah, that is something that you need to work on. What else? I'm trying to think of the last thing that could be interesting that you could use. I guess another option as an aside, if it's possible, you can remove yourself from environments that are stifling. This might be moving out of a housing situation that stifles you and doesn't allow you to think for yourself and have aspirations that you actually want to have. This could be, ironically, I was speaking about leaving the country earlier. This could be you leaving a country. Yeah, it could just be removing yourself from an environment, especially if you know that you're particularly impressionable and susceptible to these things. Moving yourself into an environment that is a little bit more open-minded and not in an imposing way. Like, you know, there's people who are like, we're open-minded, this is what we believe and this is what you're supposed to believe. But no, like people who are very live and let live and actually give you the space and room to be curious, to explore, to make mistakes, and actually figure your things out. Yeah, cultivate those friendships, cultivate those communities that really support people being individuals and figuring out their own way. But yeah, I feel like I've spoken a lot. I'm curious what you guys think. I didn't really get to everything, but this is now too long. But yeah, I'm just like, you know, our imagination has been hijacked by all of these little things, and now we think we want all these things that we probably actually don't want. And yeah, I just don't want to live like that. I think that's dumb, and I think we should all make the life that we want to make based on our own interests and our own desires, rather than wanting things that we are told to want. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna go and we'll chat to you guys tomorrow. Bye. Have a good day. Have a good night. And yeah, bye.